everybody. Today I'm going to show you how you can greatly expand the overall uses with your standard stacked or even your pancake air compressor that's really normally only good for air nailers or even airing up your tires. For things like a small impact wrench, it's really impractical because what will happen is these use a lot of air, and let's say after one or two lug nuts, the capacity can be drained down to the point that the compressor needs to kick back on, and then you could continue. That can take a lot of time, and really for things like rotating your tires in your own driveway, it's not feasible with something like an impact wrench, and you would otherwise be stuck doing it by hand. Now, it's not that the compressor can't keep up, it's that the overall system capacity isn't enough. And I'm going to show you how you can fix that in really a matter of probably 30 or 40 minutes with a few simple items from your local home center, and it's going to be much cheaper than buying another air compressor to replace this. When we take a look at our compressor, the overall system capacity as it stands with the top and bottom tank is 4.6 gallons. Now, if you're using something that uses a lot of air, such as an impact wrench, that can drain down very quickly, and it's going to drop the overall system pressure below the threshold of the cut-on point. The compressor will kick on, and then it will kick off when the overall system pressure is brought up to the cut-off point. What we will do is add on an auxiliary tank in line between the compressor and the tool, doubling, or in this case, more than doubling the system capacity. Our auxiliary tank is 5 gallons, which means when we tie it into the main compressor, our overall system capacity will go to 9.6 gallons. If you're familiar with a small portable air tank like this one, then you know that the valve that they have will allow you to put air in the tank and remove it as necessary to fill up your car tires. And they even have a small pressure gauge to tell you what the pressure is inside. Unfortunately, all of this will need to be removed, and we're only worried about the fitting that's actually welded into the tank. Now, as you're doing this, you might realize that the fitting that's screwed into the airflow control valve is standard 1/4-inch NPT threads. And why couldn't you just cut the end off of the fill hose, put a different adapter on there, and then use this as a storage tank? Well, it would work as a storage tank, but because the airflow is so restricted going through this fitting, it would not be useful for any sort of use as far as automotive or otherwise, and really is only good for filling up car tires. I'll pop this off here now and show you exactly what I mean. Now, if we take a look at this valve versus a standard air fitting, look at the very small hole in the bottom of here. Just looking at a 1/4-inch NPT fitting, you can see the difference between that plug size and the hole size. The standard 1/4-inch plug would allow for much greater flow than the airflow control fitting. Because the fitting on the side of the tank has 1/2-inch NPT threads, we need to step that down to a 1/4-inch NPT to work with our standard air fittings. I have a 1/2-inch to 1/4-inch adapter, a T-fitting, as well as a plug and a coupler. In addition to that, I have a small lead hose. And the way that I'm going to assemble this is to tie everything together with the lead hose in between the plug and the T-fitting. This will allow us to plug it directly into our regular compressor. We can set this tank to the side, and then using our longer air line going to the air tool, we'll plug that directly into the coupler. So now that everything's assembled, you can see exactly what we ended up with. The T-fitting is now coming out of the side of the tank. One side of it's going to have a coupler, the other side has a lead hose along with a 1/4-inch plug that can now be plugged directly into the main compressor. I've set the air compressor up on the bench, it's completely aired up, and it's just under 125 psi. What we'll do now is go ahead and plug that lead hose into one of the couplers, and this will allow the entire system to equalize in pressure. You'll notice the pressure gauge drops significantly. the compressor will kick on, it will raise the air pressure up in all three tanks until they're all the same, which is going to be roughly 125 psi. And at that point, rather than having a 4.6 gallon compressor, we're going to have a 9.6 gallon compressor. There are two different gauges. One's going to be the tank pressure gauge. The other one is going to be the outlet pressure gauge. They are different because the outlet pressure is controlled with the regulator. So this is the one you really want to keep an eye on. Right now it's just under 125 psi. When I take the lead hose and plug it into the coupler, watch how much it drops. And now that it's cut back off, you can see that the equalized tank pressure between both tanks of the Husky, as well as that auxiliary tank, have an equalized pressure of 125 psi. And just that fast, we were able to greatly increase the overall capacity of our compressor by adding on that separate tank. Now you do want to keep in mind when you want to remove that tank from the system, but you don't want to remove all the air out of your main compressor, you can do that by backing off the regulator valve back to zero. This will allow the entire auxiliary tank to decompress without affecting your main tanks. But if you do want to remove the air from the entire system, you can just open up that shutoff valve on the bottom of the tank. This will allow the entire system to drop in pressure. But like I said, if you just want to remove that tank, all you'll need to do is take the regulator valve, back it down to zero, and it's going to drain off without affecting your main compressor. To test this out, what we've done is hooked up the compressor to a 50-foot air line plugged into a stubby impact wrench. I'm going to see how many lug nuts it can remove off this Honda Pilot before the compressor has to kick back on because the pressures have dropped. And then we'll do that same test with the auxiliary tank hooked up to it. We'll wait for it to fill up fully and then see how many lug nuts we can get with that extra capacity. One last thing to keep in mind, these lug nuts have not been off for 4 months when I last rotated these tires. Since then, we put roughly 10,000 miles on it. And when I put them back on, I use a calibrated torque wrench to torque them all down to 90 foot-pounds. So it didn't even make it through 2 lug nuts before the compressor had to kick back on. I'll go ahead and remove this and then we'll re-torque it down. Now I've hooked the auxiliary tank up, waited for everything to fill up, and connected the 50-foot airline to that. Instead of 4.6 gallons of capacity, we now have 9.6 gallons of capacity. I left the outlet pressure as well as the tank pressure exactly the same, and the only thing that I've done is added on this tank. Now let's see how many lug nuts we can remove without the compressor kicking on like the first time. And we were able to remove all 5 lug nuts. The tank pressure is equalized and it caused the compressor to kick on. So in this case, we would be able to rotate this tire without the compressor kicking on. And by the time it got done filling up, we'd be ready for the next tire. So now you've seen how easy it is to take a standard air compressor, add on an auxiliary air tank, and essentially double the storage capacity for the entire system. In this case, we went from 4.6 gallons to 9.6 gallons. And that's very important with things like air impact wrenches. This particular one would remove maybe 2 or 3 lug nuts with this compressor before the motor would have to kick back on to bring the pressure levels back up. And what will happen is by adding on the auxiliary tank, we can now remove the lug nuts off an entire wheel. Now also keep in mind, because the compressor and the motor have not changed, with these tanks maybe taking 1 minute to go back to full pressure, by adding on the auxiliary tank, it's now going to take 2 minutes. If you're going to do a lot of automotive work, something like this would not be an ideal setup, and you should definitely invest in a larger compressor. But if you are a homeowner or DIYer and you want to change the tires in your own driveway, this would be a really good option and would prevent you from having to go out and buy a larger compressor with a larger storage tank. If you like this video, please click like. If you like my channel, please click subscribe. And thanks for watching.